Hi everyone! In this video, let's talk about the Blendit add-on. This is actually a very useful add-on to mix and merge textures from different objects. So let's see where we can download the add-on. There's a link in the description, and once you go to the link, you can see it's a paid add-on. It costs 6 euros, which is about $7, which is not much, but it's very useful and totally worth it. Okay, so let's go back to Blender, and once you install the add-on, let's see how we can enable it. So as usual, you go to Edit, Preferences, and under Add-ons, on Search, you type in Blendit, and remember to click on the checkbox to activate it. Okay, once you do that, the add-on will be functional. So next step is to switch to the rendered mode. So click on this button here to switch to the rendered mode. And let's delete everything from our scene because we're not going to use this setup. So let's hit letter A and then X to delete everything. Once that is done, let's create a plane. So Shift A, Mesh Plane. And let's scale it up about 10 times. Okay, once that is done, let's create a sunlight. So create a sun with Shift A, Light, Sun, and let's move it up. So G, Z to grab it and move it on the Z axis, and let's rotate it slightly on the X axis. Now let's increase the intensity to 4 and turn on contact shadows. So expand the shadows and click on contact shadows to enable it. And let's increase the distance to 2.5 meters. Now let's go to the Properties tab and enable Ambient Occlusion and Screen Space Reflections. And let's increase the Ambient Occlusion to 2 meters. This way we'll have a high quality shadow, okay? So we're ready to import the assets from Megascans now. So in this case, I'll go to Bridge, and I will import two assets that I selected beforehand, a surface and a rock, okay? So let's click on the surface, and one thing which is very important, once you click on the asset, go to Export Settings and select a 4K texture, okay? You don't need anything more than that for the surfaces. And of course, export to Blender, and just click on Export and wait a little bit. Okay, so now you have the export successfully message. We can go back to Blender, and once you click on the plane, we'll have the options on the drop-down menu to apply the material we just imported from Bridge. Okay, so now the material is applied, and it looks really good actually. Let's just organize the nodes a little bit. So let's move them a little bit in a more organized fashion. Okay. And let's change the scale of this texture as well. So click on the albedo node and hit Ctrl T. You must have the node wrangler enabled to activate the mapping nodes. Okay, so under type, let's change to texture, and let's connect the other nodes as well. So click and shift click and hit F on your keyboard. If you have the node wrangler, they will connect automatically. Okay. So once you've done that, we can change the scale accordingly, okay? So just click and drag over all the 3 scale coordinates and move your mouse left or right, okay, to change the scale. And look at this, it now looks much better. So let's go to Edit Mode and right-click and subdivide this plane. So right-click, subdivide, and click on Shift-R to repeat the action and add a little bit more subdivisions. Around 6 times is okay. That looks good. So with the plane set up, now let's import the rock asset. So go back to Bridge, click on the rock asset, and now the only thing is we only need to change from Mesh LOD to LOD 0, and the texture resolution should be 2K. You don't need more than that because otherwise the scene may become laggy. So let's click on Export, and once we have the message exported successfully, we can go back to Blender and the rock is already there. It's rather small, so let's scale it up. So hit S and move your mouse away from the rock. Now let's move it down to sink it into the sand. And it looks pretty good actually, but the problem is this actually encounter between the texture of the sand and the texture of the rock is really bad. So let's improve it, and that's where the Blendit add-on comes in handy. So let's take a look at how it works. So hit letter N on your keyboard to open the add-ons panel and click on Blendit tab. Now you need to select your asset, in this case the rock, and then shift click to select the source material, in this case the plane. And when you click on Create Dynamic Blends, you can see the sand texture has been applied to the rock. But actually it's not perfect yet because it covers most of the rock. Maybe that's what you want, but let's select the rock and change the distance value. So when you change the distance, you make the sand go closer to the transition between the rock and the sand, and it looks very natural. We can change the individual scale, which if you have more than one object in the scene, lets you adjust the scale of the transition individually. And this is very dynamic because if we move the rock, for example, sink it down, you can see the transition adapts to whatever portion of the rock is coming out of the sand. So it looks pretty nice. Look that all the normals has been transferred to the rock, so it's a continuation from the sand into the rock. This is actually pretty cool. So now let's duplicate the rock and see how the scene work with other assets. So Shift D, duplicate the rock, and let's move it a little bit to the right. And notice that the copies you make, they retain the same transitions, okay? Even if you rotate it or scale or move it up, the transitions will still be natural according to the position of the new object in the scene. Now let's duplicate it one more time, and this time let's move it down. So let's just place it over here so it can have a different position. And remember, you can adjust the transition on each individual rock by changing the individual scale slider, okay? So that's pretty much it, and I hope this video was useful. So as usual, thank you all for watching, and if you like the video, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I see you all in the next video.